local system administrator, just the abbreviation LSA. I know we're not all used to it. Half the time I'm not used to it, but they wanted us to be able to shorten having to type in the whole thing, local system administrator, because it came up so often and during some of the emails and other things that we were doing that we're gonna try to make this LSA a thing. Kind of like the whole idea of that we can do Brangelina. So going into the overview, this training is not meant to be a substitute for the WIOA training series offered by OET. I'm going to tell you right now, my office partner, Jim Potts, does an excellent job with his WIOA training. If you haven't had the basic IWDS training, or if you have new employees, his training is the bomb. I will be honest with you, he's got a really good system down. He updates it as things come along with changes to eligibility, basic skills deficient, all the different things. He stays on top of it. And those of you who have worked with Jim Potts, he's thorough. The guy knows his stuff. I refer to the two of us as the nuts and the bolt. I know the system itself and the edits and how the computer works and what it's supposed to be, and I can make technical corrections. Jim understands the eligibility to the same degree that I understand the system. So between the two of us, we make a nice set where one of us is going to be able to help you. And most of the time, our skills overlap where both of us are able to. So this training is about what a local system administrator can change or edit on a client screen after the client has been certified, and how to submit for client modifications if you need assistance from Office of Employment Training for changes that you can't make. Please be aware that just because something can be changed doesn't mean it always should be changed. This is extremely important. The local system administrator needs to be aware of how these changes made today can affect client eligibility that was already certified before you make any alterations. For example, let's say the person came in and they were marked as basic skills deficient because your math score had a GLE of 5. And oops, their math score was a GLE of 12. Well, their reading was a GLE of 12. Well, that means the person is no longer basic skills deficient, and that eligibility is now no longer applicable. So that becomes a bigger change than just changing a test score. One of the other things that we're going to discuss in here is what data should be updated and what shouldn't, and we'll get into that. Just keep in mind when I say the word snapshot in time, and I'll explain more later. So IWDS, when you're creating a customer record, it has two distinct levels of data entry. The upper level, which is the customer level, is where the most up-to-date information is stored. If a new application is added to an existing client, the customer information from the newest application will automatically overwrite the existing customer level data. The IWDS user can also manually update the customer level data at any time. There's only one customer level record per client, and you can have as many possible application levels under this customer level as needed. Let me take a look and just see something here. Yes. So the application level, so we have this person's Ruth Aaron. I'm a big baseball fan, so I use Babe Ruth and Hank Aaron. So Ruth Aaron, her customer level account was back there. Her application level is where we have all the different times where she has a program record. So whether it be an inquirent, an applicant, a registrant, or an exiter, all of those applications throughout all the years are going to be found under the customer record in the application level. So the client can have multiple application level records. This person could be co-enrolled in trade and WIOA. The person could have an LWIA 1 account and an LWIA 90 record because they also qualified for a statewide grant. You could have a person who in 2021 had an inquirent record, as well as turning around and coming back in 3 months later, and you put in another record, which they actually turn around and went to applicant or even registrant level. So each record is individualized and saved here. And each application level record is a snapshot in time. This is one of those key phrases. I think it's the easiest way to explain it. This is how Jerry Snyder, for those of you who have been around a long time, explained it to me when I first came on in 2010. Each application level is the client's correct information at the time and date of the application. So if this person got married or moved or had any other changes after their 5/1/2020 application date, and the client's certified, I have to point that out, any updated information is going to go on the customer level. You're not going to change it in the application. So if Ruth Aaron got married and became Ruth Mays, and her application date is 5/1/2020, and she got married July 1st of 2021, we're not changing this 5/1/2020 WIOA registrant record. It's always going to say Ruth Aaron. You're going to go to the customer level, back up here, there it is, and you're going to change it under the contact information in the customer profile of the customer level. This is where you're going to update her, if there's a name change, an address change, anything like that, phone number, email, all of that's going to get changed at the customer level, not the application. The information in the application record is a snapshot in time. It's frozen. It's the day that you took the application from the client. Any changes after that date don't go in there, they go on the customer level. And that's something that a lot of places, it's hard to get through to some career planners, and they just don't get it. You just got to tell them, look, this is a frozen snapshot in time. It's like we're looking at a history book. This is the way it was on this day, and it's not supposed to change. Now, sometimes a client comes into an LWIA and the career planner might forget to search for the existing IWDS record for the client, and maybe they go to enter them and they type in the Social Security number and they get an error, and it says, the Social Security number is already in IWDS. That's pretty common. It's going to be something you're going to deal with as a local system administrator quite a bit. So what you need to do is make sure that your people are trained that they need to do these four simple searches before they do any data entry. These are the ones that Jim Potts and I have determined are the most common searches. They'll find 99.5% of existing IWDS records. Now, as a caveat, I will say sometimes you'll get an error on that Social Security number, and it's not because the actual person is in IWDS. Once again, 99% of the time, it's not a fraud case, although it has happened, where we had somebody who was an illegal immigrant and was using a Social Security number of a real person. However, most of the time, what we had is in going back to 2001 through 2014, in order to access the resource room and use the services provided, such as resume building, job hunting, everything else, the user had to enter a Social Security number. And I would say that a majority of the people who came in just to use the resource room made up a Social Security number just so they could move on. They didn't want to put their real one in. Those records are still in here. And as we find them, we remove the Social Security numbers from the record so that you, as your career planner, can enter the person who has the valid ID in. In a case like that, we're just going to ask that you verify the Social Security card, that this truly is their Social Security number before I remove it from an old record. But jumping back onto this is the four simple searches. I do have a PDF with these four simple searches that I need to, I will, after this part of the presentation is over, I will send in to have Kirsten post it so that you guys have it as a PDF that you can share with your career planners. And this is exactly what I've got. I created a person, made up the name Justina Thompson. She has a date of birth of 6/5/1991 and a social security number of 366123456. The first search that I recommend is a partial last name and the last four of the SSN. Now, I'm going to explain why I say partial. IWDS is a smart system, for lack of a better term. If you type in the full name Thompson, Thompson, it's going to look for anything that is Thompson and then anything after it. So it would bring back Thompson-Ives or Thompsons with an S at the end, or Thompson Lee with an LEE at the end. But if you're looking for Thompsen, it's not going to take it back for you. It's not going to look up. It's going to look for exactly what's here plus anything else. So I recommend I usually would do the first three letters of any last name when I do a partial, but I went ahead and I put Thomp because I would say that when doing Thompson, more than likely Thomp is probably safe. The rest of the spelling could get wonky. So we got Thomp as your partial last name. It's going to bring back anything that starts with Thomp and has the social security number last four digits of 3456. So if the person's out there, barring a misspelling on the letters that you put in the partial, it's going to find everything that meets this minimum criteria. Then, let's say the results are too large, that you have too much. There's 19 pages of Thompson with 3456, or things that start with Tomp. You can do a partial first name and partial last name. So in this case, I've got Thomp and first name Jus. So it'll bring back Justin Thompson, Justice, Justina, Just, anything that begins with, it has a first name like this. So it'll limit it down. And usually if you have something where it's a common last name like Kevin Smith, and you've got 19 pages of results on Kevin Smith, you can limit it down further. Just add more letters. Let's say it's Kevan, Kevan instead of Kevin. So instead of Kev, you add, you can drill it down based on what your partial is. So these are the first two that I would run. You run a partial last name with the last four SSN, and if the results are too much, then add in a partial first name. If you're not finding any results there, these last two searches are essential if you think there could be a legal name change, especially if your client's female. They're much more likely to have a legal name change from a marriage or divorce. And, you could have a client, when you're looking up the different things, you have the search customer level and you have the search applications level. You could have a client that's in the customer level that has multiple applications with different last names under them. So what we do to get through that is if you do the last four of the social security number and the birth date, those two, when combined, are pretty unique. If you get more than two results, I'd say you better go buy a lottery ticket, because I've never seen it. Because the idea of somebody having a 1 in 365 that matches even 1 in 366 when you count leap year with the social security number last four digits, it's just not going to happen. So searching with the last four and the birth date is generally going to find the person every time if they're in here, unless we've got a typo or a data entry error. The last search, which I recommend, especially when you're dealing with a female client, you just do the partial first name with the last four. So it wouldn't matter if Justina is out here as Justina Reynolds, Justina Smith, Justina, Terry, Justina Thompson. She could have, I have actually seen an IWDS record where this woman, going all the way back to her first record in 2001, had been in and requested services 14 different applications with the IWDS systems data entry, 4 different Alias, 10 different last names. I'm not kidding. 10 different last names on the application level. So the only way you're really going to find this woman, because you don't know what, depending on where you're looking, what you're doing, she has all these different names under the application level, but the customer level, her first name and the last 4 of her social are not going to change. So this would be the easiest way to find that. So these 4 searches are what I call the gold, the gold standard. If your career planner, before doing the data entry, does these 4 searches, I'm 99.5% positive your person's not in IWDS. I will relate one other story. I do have to say that the 0.5%, I had a guy, I don't know if Matt Jones is on here, but this was a Rick Stubblefield one. St. Clair County, real close to St. Louis. This particular guy comes in wanting services, and his social pops up, and he's wanting services, and he's already in IWDS. And it comes back to a John Doe or Jim Smith, whatever you want to call it. Well, it's because the guy legally changed his name to his rapper name of Shiny Nickel. So he had a legal name change to his stage name, but he'd received services in IWDS under his old legal name, and that is the only time I've ever seen anything like that. And I will never forget, Shiny Nickel was his stage name, and that was the name that he was now in wanting to go into IWDS, and that's why it wasn't matching up. So we can find anything. So once you guys have an issue, you're going to have to get the whole social security number to me. Now with HIPAA, we have 2 ways to do this. You either call me or send me an email asking me to call you to get the full social, and I can do a search on the SQL side backend looking to see what records in IWDS with that full social. Or you send me an email with a protected PDF and then you send me the key or login in a separate email with the social security number or a PDF of the social security card. Or the third option is, we have found that if you send me the first 5 in one email with one header, and you send me the last 4 in a different email with a different header, that's not in violation because the whole social is not in one email. So I prefer the phone. I think it's a lot cleaner, and then we have no possibility of a physical trace of putting a whole social down. You just send me an email, tell me what phone number to call you back at, and when I have a second, I'll give you a quick call. It'll take less than 5 minutes. So now, if when you're looking the person up, you discover that your career planners have entered multiple records for this person, similar to this. So this particular guy here, he's got one record with his social security number, and he's got another record that's in here, and we have 2 choices. We can either make a request to delete the bad record or make a request to merge the records. So what we do is I would click View, and I'd go into the top record, and I'd take a look to see what's in there. Is it data that we really want? So if the guy's got local services, universal services under that record, we kind of want to keep that. So I'm going to merge that data. Now, let's say your career planner started entering the person because they didn't search, and then they get to the social and they find out that, oh no, he's already in IWDS. Well, more than likely, I'm going to tell you we need to delete the new record, and he needs to go add an application under the one with the social. That's just, I mean, sometimes, I hate to say this, but if you make things too easy, they don't learn their lesson. And if you've got a guy, and I had a particular user who, I would say 3 or 4 times a week, he was, hey, I need these records merged. Well, I finally said I wasn't going to do it anymore, because I had other duties and other things that were more important on my plate at the time that were demanding my attention. And I was like, look, sorry, you're just going to have to re-enter it under the right thing. Well, a couple times of it hurting him a little bit and him having to redo the work, suddenly he's an ace at searching for clients, and he doesn't do this mistake anymore. So, as I was saying, we take a look at the case notes and the list all services under the record that we think is the bad record. And if there's things in here, we want to merge them. Now, if they're just blanks and there's nothing there, then we're going to want to delete them, because we don't really need to merge that record in, because it's got nothing that's going to be healthy. So the request to merge or delete the records, the local system administrator is going to need to send an email to me or to Jim with a screenshot similar to this, with a detail of which record to keep and which one to get rid of. Now, on a merge request, they're always going to assume that whatever record has the Social Security number is the correct one. Now, here's the other funny thing. You're going to occasionally come up with something like this, and it's going to look like the social's right on all of them. I'll bet money that if you click into it, you're going to find 99% of the time there's a typo in one. Like they flipped 2 of the numbers. Like instead of the middle numbers being 7-6, it's 6-7. You need to let us know which one's the right social. So when we merge it, that and this is a request that I can't do. I have to send this into the programmers. So it could take a little while to come back depending on what their workload's like. But we want to put all this information into the correct customer record. So you just got to give me as much detail as you can as to which one's the right one. Okay, making correction to IWDS clients. If the client is still in incurrent status, then the career planner can edit the client themselves, as none of the fields will be locked as long as it's in an incurrent status. So if they come to you and they want you to fix something and you open it up and you see it's incurrent, you can tell them to go do it themselves. Now, if they're at applicant level, where they've actually certified the client but they haven't entered a service yet, then the local system administrator and the career planner are only able to edit the unlocked fields, meaning there's going to be fields that are going to be locked now. Social, some of the other information is going to be locked, and you're going to have to make a modification request to have that done. Anything other than a quickie typo is supposed to go through your monitoring staff. And each of you guys know who your monitors are for the different OEAs, whether it be Brian Ellis or Brian Tippy or any of the others. It's going to go through them. Now, if it's something simple like you accidentally put BOBBI instead of BOBBY, you can email us and we can make that correction without it being anything major. But anything that's going to be a change of like a test score or anything like that probably needs to go through and have the modification request and be approved. Any fields that are unlocked, obviously you can change yourself and don't have to worry about it. Now, the local system administrator you can edit fields, delete services, and even delete eligibility certifications. We're going to quickly kind of go through some of these screens. So, the application definition screen. The local system administrator, you can change the Illinois WorkNet Center for or the name of the career planner. So let's say you want to transfer a client from being with career planner Jane Doe and move it over to Jane Smith. You just go in here under career planner and you select the career planner you want the client to be assigned to. If you've got the wrong Illinois WorkNet Center, In this case, career link Tazewell County 200. Let's say you meant to do career link Tazewell County 500. You can change that, no problem. But those are the only choices in these two drop-down menus are going to be specific to the LWIA where the local system administrator is assigned. When you do the career planner drop-down, it's going to be all career planners at your LWIA. You're not going to have accidentally a career planner from another LWIA in there that you could select. It's not going to happen. Just like up here in the Illinois WorkNet Center, when you drop down and you're looking at this thing for LWIA 15 and it's Tazewell County, you're not going to have a drop-down choice that's suddenly got Cook County in it. It's not going to happen. So if the client's not showing up in the Career Planner's My Customers menu and the Quickie menu at the beginning, make sure that this thing down here, Show on My Applications, is marked yes. Because if the Career Planner accidentally changes that to no, then when they do the shortcut menu of My Registrants or My Exiters or My Applications, this isn't going to show up in there unless this says yes. Now, if you change the contact date, the IWDS system will not let the contact date be greater than the application date. So if you have somebody who came in and had a contact date of 2/1/2021 and their application date is 3/1/2021, if for some reason you need to go in and change the contact date, you can change it all the way up to making it equal to the application date. But you're not going to be able to make the contact date newer or greater than the application date because the system's not going to allow it. On the application definition screen, the local system administrator can also delete the entire application. Let's say the person came in, started filling everything out, and then they never showed up again. You don't have any services, you don't have a whole lot going on. If you don't think that it's worth having the person in here, you just go right here, you click this delete button, and it will delete almost everything related to the application. It's not going to delete the customer level. It's going to delete this application. So if you have 5 other applications for this person, but this person came in, you had an incurrent record, and now they've come back 2 months later and you're doing a new incurrent record that's going to become an application or a registrant, you can always go in and delete the old incurrent because you don't need it. Now, it's going to get rid of the services, the certification, the client data, test data, and more. But it's not going to delete case notes, and it's not going to delete the customer level, and it's not going to delete other applications. Concurrent program screen, and I need to update this as we have changed this screen. I'm making a quick note here that I need to put a new screenshot. Bobby Fiati. I'm a Guy's Grocery Games fan, so that's where I took that name from. So anyway, we've changed that screen. I'll update it and we'll get that taken care of. The local system administrator is going to have all of these choices able to be open to be changed between yes and no. Keep in mind, once again, we're talking about the snapshot in time. We only want concurrent programs for the client as of the application date, not programs added after the application date. We're not concerned about that. We want the snapshot in time. Characteristics and barrier screen. You're not able to change any of these. All of these are going to require an IWDS modification form. They're not something that you can change. The employment characteristics screens. You're only able to change tenure or whether or not the person is a dependent of a seasonal or migrant or seasonal farm worker. Everything else on the screen is going to require an IWDS modification form. Education status. The only things you're able to change are the Pell Grant recipient and the Pell Grant amount. Everything else is going to require a change. And this is one of those things that we're talking about, that if we're changing it, we need to make sure that it's not going to, you need to think about whether or not it's going to affect eligibility. If you're dealing with youth in school, out of school, this could make a big deal if you're changing the person from whether or not they're actually attending school or not. The basic skills stuff, it could change whether or not a person's basic skills deficient or not. It may take someone who wasn't and make them basic skills deficient, or it could take someone who was basic skills deficient at the time and you certified them as such, and suddenly they're not, which means we'll have to change the eligibility. So if you're making a change modification request that's going to affect something like this, you need to think bigger than just the field at hand. You need to ask yourself, does this affect the eligibility? On the test screen, the local system administrator is not able to change anything. So you go into these tests and you look, and you're not able to change the date. You're not able to change any of this. This is one that's got to be turned in as an IWDS modification request form. And this, honestly, is the #1 most common change that we're having to fix, that we're having to make in records. The career planners aren't being careful when they do the entry. TABE and CASAS, they have to pick category of adult basic education. Don't pick category other. Functional area, make sure that you're putting the reading score on the reading and the math score on the math. Make sure you're picking, this is the #1 mistake field that's corrected. I would just tell your career planners that when they're entering this, double check it before you hit save, because it will save you a lot of headaches if they take their time on these. I'd say over half of your corrections will be gone. Public assistance screen. Local system administrators only able to change this very bottom one, which most people don't use, which is the most recent date referred to other federal state assistance. Everything else on here, whether they're transitional refugee, SSI, SSDI, food stamp, TANF, DHS case number, these are all going to be modification requests. Family characteristics screen and the list family screen that's the derivative from it. The local system administrator cannot change any of that. Any changes to this is going to require an IWDS modification form. Just in Jim Potts' training, he goes through this. Just make sure your career planners understand that, this is something that, once again, they really need to kind of double check it before they click save. Income calculation field has to be a modification request form. Dislocated worker characteristics. The one thing here, and this is one that you really need to be careful and know what you're doing if you're using displaced homemaker, and the 4 DWG disaster fields. If you're not doing a DWG disaster grant, you don't have to worry about these fields. But this displaced homemaker, this means that the person was married to the person who lost their job. So the person was a homemaker. They took care of the home, took care of the children, however you want to phrase it. They're the spouse of the person who was affected by the job loss. It doesn't mean that the person is a maid or is a house cleaner. It means that the homemaker is the person who is the spouse of someone who is affected by job loss, job change. We have a training criteria. All of these are open to you guys being able to switch it. So the assessment, the initial IEP, you can switch whether these things are yes or no. If you're changing it to no, that's going to affect your, you're not supposed to be able to get past this if it's a no. So hopefully you're not changing that from yes to no. But you can change who the assessment was given by. Was it given by the LWIA? Was it given by someone else? Same with the IEP. Then whether or not they meet the qualifications for the selected training program, is the training program in demand, or other grant sources are unavailable. These are all things you guys are able to update. The eligibility determination screen. The local system administrator, you can always add a new title program eligibility, and it doesn't even have to be the same initial eligibility date. You could turn around, you could have the 1A adult career services, and let's say they redid their math test on 4-1 for some reason, and now they're basic skills deficient on math. Well, you could always turn around and do an eligibility date of 4-1-21, which would give you new choices to certify for your eligibility based on that new test score or based on that new information. Not going to happen very often. It's very rare that I see different eligibility dates on the same record, but it is a possibility. In this case, if you've got the adult career services and the BSD career services and you accidentally did both, or you did this one and then you added that one, you can always click on the certification date, which then brings us to the field here, and you can delete a certification. So, for example, let's say you had an error of the test score, like we talked about. You had a GLE of 5, but it was because it was a data entry, and it truly was a GLE of 12, and the person's not basic skills deficient. You'll come in here, and we're going to delete the BSD certification because it's no longer proper. The documentation is not there for it. It doesn't fit the criteria. Just be very careful if you're deleting certification to make sure that any related services are deleted before doing it. For example, let's say you put it in as 1E instead of 1D, and you've got some 1E services in there. You need to delete all those 1E services before you delete the 1E certification. Things like that happen. It's just not very often. Contact information. Once again, we go back to the snapshot in time. This should be accurate as of the application date. Now, let's say we have a data entry error and the zip code's wrong. That's a modification request form change. We can go in and make the change on the application level if it's a documented data entry error that is, the application date. But if it's the person moved on 7/1/21, you go to the customer level and update it there. And that's something that is open to the local system administrator and to the career planner. But the application level will be locked, like you see here, as soon as you hit the certification, application or applicant or registrant. If you're going to submit any things, you need to just make sure that you can verify that they were accurate for the application date for the snapshot in time. Additional contacts field. Local system administrator is able to add new contacts and change any fields on an existing contact without having to turn anything in. So to remove a contact completely requires an IWDS modification form. Once again, you should verify that any changes on the screen were accurate as of the application date, and that any changes that occur after the application date need to be made to the additional contact screen on the customer level. So if they met a guy, got married, and now he's their contact, if that person is a new contact after the application date, you're going to add them at the customer level, not the application level. Private information screen. Most of this is going to be locked on certification. You can change or add to their race, ethnicity. So if the person came in and initially said that they were white, but now they're saying that they've got some American Indian or Pacific Islander, you can always just add an additional check mark. If they're saying they now are wanting to identify themselves as Asian, not white, you can get rid of the white and add Asian, so on. Everything else that you see here, with the exception of the selective service compliance, is locked. The disability you can add to or remove, but what you're looking at here with the selective service number individual, the individual with disability, this is where you can say yes, and then it allows you to change these. If you say no, you need to remove any check marks here before you change it to no. But once again, make sure that if anything you're changing on the screen was actually accurate as of the application date, Otherwise, you make the changes at the customer level. Veterans information. Local system administrator cannot change any fields. Any changes require an IWDS modification form, and any updates to this that changes after the application date will be made on the customer level. Your person came in, they were not a veteran. During the course of their time with you, they enlist in the military for National Guard. That is not an application level change, that is a customer level change because they enlisted after the application date. List work history. The local system administrator is not allowed to add any new records to the local work history on the application level. You can click on any employer record to make changes to that record. The exception is any job associated with a WIA dislocated worker eligibility criteria cannot be updated by the local system administrator at the application level. So if that's coming across automatically, or if it's a dislocation job, by the way, any one that comes across in all capital letters came over as a direct update from IDES. You didn't enter it, we didn't enter it. It came through because of their social security number. But if they've got this dislocation job selected as yes, then it's going to be locked, and you're going to have to make a modification form request to make any changes. Now we're in the job screen here, the edit job, and if it's not a dislocation job, you can change all of the fields. To remove the employer completely, you just click delete. It gets rid of the entire job record. Verify any changes made to the screen were accurate as of the application date. So for example, though, if you've got somebody who you had as pending layoff and their end date hadn't been put on there yet, and now they've been let go and it's after the application date, you make that change at the customer level, not the application level. So any changes occurring after the application date have to be made to the list work history screen on the customer level. Exception would be jobs associated with the dislocated worker eligibility. Those changes won't transfer over because the job is locked at the application level due to eligibility. So if it is a dislocated worker job and there is an error on it, you have to submit the form for us to make a correction. Services. Local system administrator will need to click on the individual service record to see whether or not you can make changes. Some services you can, some services you can't. We've had so many changes to the services, renaming them different things. It was too much of an overwhelming burden to try to add each individual service in here as a choice. In this case, we're going to take a look at the development of an IEP service, and you're able to switch the grant, you're able to switch the provider by clicking on it. You can pick a different provider, you can change the weekly hours, and you can add comments. Any of the fields which are not open, you have to submit an IWDS modification request form for it. You also, as a local system administrator, have the power to delete an entire service. So different services will have different fields open and closed. One of the things you have to watch for, though, let's say you got somebody who's got some career services and some training services all in the same title. If you delete all of the career services and still leave the training services, you could possibly lock up the client. In order to have training services, you have to have career services. That's just the way the system goes. That's the way the program goes. So if you've got training and career services, you cannot delete all the career services and leave the training services. It's just not going to fly. List case note screen. Local system administrator is able to click on the individual case note using the view button. For the individual case note you want to update. The local system administrator is not able to delete case notes. Any case notes needing a deletion will require an IWDS modification request change form. And as I said earlier, anytime you have to fill out that form, you're supposed to submit it through your monitoring staff, who will then approve it or deny it and submit it to us for the change. Maintain case note. So this is going into that individual case note. You can change the program, you can change the note category, whether it's confidential or not, meaning it's limited to that career planner or the local system administrator. You can change the note subject, you can change the case note. You cannot change the contact date. So if you can't change the staff name that's on here for who made the record or the contact date. If those fields need changed, just make a request to delete the entire record, and then have the person who you want to be the staff name re-enter the case note with the correct date. Submitting to monitors for IWDS modifications. Once again, we've got this. The LWIAs are currently separated into one of 3 regions. Northern region carries 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11. Central has 4, 13, 14, 15, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 23. And Southern has 22, 24, 25, 26. And I believe you guys should know who your monitoring staff is. If not, you can send a quick email. Annie Dorr is over all of the monitors. You can submit to any of the monitoring staff you're familiar with. Levi Bierup, Brian Tippy, asking who you should be submitting to. You can always, like I said, always email me or Jim. We can find out who it is that you should be sending your forms to or talking to for your modifications. The current form looks like this. It's something that the monitoring staff can provide, or you can ask. I believe we've got some PDFs of it, Jim and I, and you can get that form from the Office of Employment Training Monitoring staff. Local system administrator fills this out and includes supporting documentation for the modification. You want us to change the Social Security number? You better include the Social Security card, proving that this is their social. You want to update the address? You got to give us something saying, why we should be updating the application level that's frozen in time. Could be that they, it's a typo. You just need to, tell us why. Once the monitoring staff reviews the request, if they approve it, they'll forward it to either Jim Potts or Chris Tylen to do the modification. And if it involves an exeter, they'll be sending it probably to Paula Berry. Transferring clients between LWIAs. Sometimes clients will have a reason to switch LWIAs. It could be that they had a physical move. There can be other valid reasons as well. Could be the person lives on the border, that they're closer to the other LWIA office than they are to yours. There's all kinds of reasons that could be valid. To begin the process of transferring the client from one LWIA to another, the giving LWIA and the receiving LWIA have to agree to make the transfer. It needs to be understood that if you are the gaining LWIA, that you're going to be getting the client from the other LWIA, you are accepting this client for performance outcomes and any future monitoring or data validation that might occur. Now, the receiving LWIA does not have to accept the transfer if they don't want to be responsible for the client. So if they look at the client, they've met with the client's not returning calls already, and the transfer hasn't happened yet, you're reading case notes, and this person really doesn't look like someone that you want to be responsible for performance outcomes. The receiving LWIA can deny the transfer. They can say, no, we don't want them. And, that's the receiving LWIA's choice. So once all parties have agreed to the client transfer, the local system administrator for the LWIA, either the giving or the receiving, will send an email to the IWDS system administrators, Jim Potts and Chris Tylen, both of us, with the local system administrator from the other LWIA CC'd. So the giving LWIA or the receiving LWIA can initiate the transfer request, but when they send it, they need to make sure the local system administrator for the other LWIA is CC'd on the request. So the email will then detail the customer's name, the last 4 of the social, the Illinois WorkNet Center they're going to be assigned to, and the name of the new case manager that will be taking over the client in the receiving LWIA. The receiving LWIA's local system administrator must either state in the original email, if they're the sender, or reply to the email that the giving LWIA sent that they are accepting the transfer. We're not going to submit to make this transfer until the receiving LWIA tells us that they are accepting the client. Once this has occurred, Jim Potts or Chris Tylen will submit the transfer to the programming staff, because this is not a change that we can make, and they will notify the two of us, the local system, the IWDS system administrators. So when the programmers are done, they'll tell us, and then Jim Potts or Chris Tylen will notify both LWIAs that the transfer is completed. Finally, the receiving LWIA has to receive the original hard copies with all supporting documentation, not copies. So for example, if LWIA 5 is transferring a client to LWIA 6, LWIA 5 they can make copies to keep for themselves to validate any services or whatever that they had already done. But they have to send the original hard copies of all documentation and supporting documentation to the new LWIA. The original documents should follow the client to the new LWIA. I need to make that very clear. Not copies. You're going to send the originals. Sometimes the giving LWIA will choose to keep a copy of everything for themselves because they expended grant money on a client. I strongly recommend, if you're transferring a client and you have spent money on them, make copies and keep it for your records. You never know when you're going to need it. Here are the Office of Employment Training contacts that are mentioned in here. At this point in time, the Northern Region Monitor is Kelly Lapatino, the Central Region is Anna Marie Dorr, and the Southern Region is Brian Ellis. Here's your contact information. We talked about which LWIAs are assigned to each one in an earlier slide. This page, if something changes, I would be updating it on a future presentation. But for right now, this is who it is, and these are your contact people for those three regions. I am going to look at the chat, see if we have any questions to answer. And that looks good. I am going to say we are going to take a quick 5-minute break, and we're going to come back and cover entities and relationships at 11:20. And I'm going to make a quick correction to that concurrent program screen and get that updated to Kirsten. All right, guys, see you in 5.